My son told me I didn't deserve to be at my ex-wife's funeral. I smiled, walked to the back row of the chapel, and waited. An hour later, the lawyer read her final message aloud, and his face turned pale. What she left me changed everything. But what I did next, even I didn't see coming. Before we begin, please subscribe to the channel and let us know in the comments where you're listening from. This story isn't easy to tell, but if you've ever been misunderstood, silenced, or erased by your own family, this one's for you. The autumn sun slanted through the blinds of my small living room, casting long, golden stripes across the carpet. I sat in the same worn armchair I'd used for nearly 20 years. The one Mary always said made me look like an old professor. I suppose she meant it kindly. She had a way of softening her jabs with that warm smile, the one that used to melt whatever stubborn silence I was holding on to. That chair had outlived a lot of things. Our marriage, for one. My knees, certainly. And now, apparently, even her. I stared at the envelope in my lap. No return address, just my full name written in block letters across the front. Joseph Whitaker. No dad. No mister. No familiar slant or soft curve of a familiar hand. Just sharp, mechanical lettering, as if someone had typed it, then traced it with a ruler. I didn't open it right away. When you're 70 and living alone, you learn that silence can hold more weight than any argument. That quiet moments, like the kind that come with an unexpected letter, stretch longer than you want them to. And sometimes they echo. It wasn't until the second cup of coffee had gone cold beside me that I finally tore the flap open. Inside, a single piece of paper, printed text. No greeting. Joseph Whitaker, this is to inform you of the passing of Mary Ann Whitaker. Funeral services will be held Friday 2 p.m. at East Hollow Chapel, Providence. You are listed as a required party for the will reading to take place immediately after the service. Sanderson and Lee, estate law. No signature, no condolences, just a date, a place, and a sentence that landed like a fist to the chest. Mary was gone. I hadn't spoken to her in 14 years. Not since the divorce papers were signed at that very same law office, Sanderson and Lee. She'd walked out of the room without a glance back, clutching her leather bag like it held her freedom. I remember watching her go and thinking, that's what a clean break looks like. But there's no such thing as clean when you've raised a child together, when you've buried a parent side by side, when you've built a life that leaves permanent fingerprints, no matter how many legal documents try to wipe them away. I stood up, knees popping like popcorn, and walked to the window. Outside, the street was empty, a quiet Wednesday, the kind of day people forget about until something like this drags it into memory. I didn't cry. I thought maybe I would. But after everything Mary and I had become, or stopped being, all I could feel was a slow, hollow tightening in my chest. Not grief. Not yet. Just something that sounded like unfinished business. The last time I saw our son Ryan was 3 years ago. He'd come to my apartment with a bottle of wine and a realtor's brochure, saying things like, "It's time to stop living like a monk, and we could sell this place and get you somewhere with an elevator." I told him I liked the stairs. He told me I was being stubborn, and Mary agreed with him, even though she wasn't in the room. She always agreed with him, especially after the split. I'd become the gray shadow in his narrative, the man who didn't dream big enough, the one who didn't push hard enough, the reason she had to become who she was in spite of someone. "Mom built something incredible," he once said to me, as if that were up for debate. "You were just along for the ride." He said it like it was fact, not with cruelty, but with certainty, like the way people talk about gravity or taxes. I booked a train to Providence the next morning. The ride was long and quiet, broken only by the polite announcements from the conductor and the occasional vibration of my phone, mostly notifications I didn't care to read. No messages from Ryan, not a single word. Maybe he didn't know I'd been invited, or maybe he did, and he thought I wouldn't show. He never did understand the quiet parts of me, the parts that grieved slowly and forgave even slower. The chapel stood on a hill just off Meadow Lane, surrounded by tall trees shedding gold and crimson into the wind. I arrived early, not because I wanted to, but because being late to your ex-wife's funeral, the mother of your child, felt like a kind of sin, even if the marriage itself hadn't survived. There were already cars in the lot, expensive ones. Ryan must have sent out notices like a press release. This wasn't a funeral. It was an event. I adjusted my tie in the rearview mirror. Navy blue. Mary once said I looked honest in navy. That was a long time ago, when she still believed I was the kind of man you could trust with your life. Inside the chapel, it smelled like lilies and polished wood. I took a seat in the back row, not wanting to draw attention. But of course I did. Ryan turned in the front pew. He saw me, and he frowned. A frown that wasn't just surprise, it was rejection. Disgust, even. The kind of expression that says, "Why are you here?" And in that moment I knew exactly what I was walking into. Ryan didn't say anything at first. He stood there in the front aisle beside the gleaming oak casket and the blown-up portrait of Mary at her retirement gala. Hair perfect, pearls flawless, smile ambitious. The version of her he always preferred. The version that didn't include me. His eyes met mine like I was a stranger in his house. His jaw tensed, and I saw the muscle twitch near his temple, a tic from childhood, whenever he was trying not to explode. He walked toward me, slow and deliberate, the hush of the chapel amplifying each click of his polished shoes. "You shouldn't be here," he said quietly, not sitting down, not even offering a hand. "I was invited," I replied. "By who?" His eyes narrowed. "Certainly not by me." "Sanderson and Lee," I said calmly. "They said I'm required for the reading." Ryan scoffed, then smiled, the kind of smile you learn in business school, tight, practiced, condescending. "Of course," he muttered. "They probably didn't know she changed everything 2 months ago." I didn't respond. I let the silence do the heavy lifting. He leaned in slightly. "You've got some nerve, Dad. She hadn't spoken your name in over a decade, and now you think you get to play grieving widower." "I'm not playing anything," I said. "I'm here to say goodbye." "She already said goodbye," Ryan snapped. "You just weren't listening." A woman in a black suit tapped him gently on the shoulder. "Mr. Whitaker, the service is about to begin." He didn't look away from me. This is for people who mattered to her. Then he turned and walked back down the aisle. I sat alone in the last row while the music started, a string quartet version of Clair de Lune, of course. Mary would have hated anything sentimental. This was curated, like everything in her life had been, strategic, tasteful, and just far enough from emotional. The pastor gave a sanitized version of her story. Brilliant mind, generous donor, fierce leader. No mention of her childhood, no mention of the years she spent being a teacher's wife, or of the rainy Tuesday afternoons she spent trying to convince Ryan to eat his vegetables. those years had been omitted. The eulogy was delivered by someone from the university's board of trustees. I listened like I was attending a meeting about a woman I used to know. When it ended, the line of mourners formed quickly, all suits, all curated grief. I didn't move. I waited until the chapel was nearly empty before stepping outside, the crisp air snapping against my face like cold water. I stood under the awning and watched the guests disperse into their sedans and German SUVs. I almost turned to leave, but then I heard a voice behind me. "You can come now," said the woman from earlier, the assistant, maybe a paralegal. "They're starting the reading in Conference Room B. It's around the side of the building." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. The room was smaller than I expected. Dim, smelled faintly of toner and old wood. At the table sat Ryan, his arms crossed, flanked by two lawyers in dark suits. One of them, an older man with glasses and a gray beard, stood as I entered. "Mr. Whitaker," he said, extending a hand. "I'm James Sanderson. Thank you for coming." I shook it. His grip was firm, professional. "I assume you've both read the introductory disclosures?" he continued. Ryan waved a hand. Yes, get on with it." Sanderson opened a thick manila folder and began. "This is the last will and testament of Mary Ann Whitaker, signed and notarized on June 2nd of this year, executed in accordance with state law. Present beneficiaries: Ryan Thomas Whitaker, son, Joseph Charles Whitaker, former spouse." Ryan muttered something under his breath. I ignored it. The deceased left no handwritten codicils or contested amendments on file. There is one recorded statement to be played following the reading. My head turned slightly. A recording? Sanderson didn't react. He simply kept reading. "To my son, Ryan Thomas Whitaker, I leave the following. The property at 212 Harbor Street, Providence, including all furnishings and physical contents therein, excluding any items noted otherwise in this document, and a cash amount of $300,000 to be released in full upon execution of the estate." Ryan exhaled, part relief, part calculation, but his eyes flicked back to Sanderson quickly. He was waiting for the big line, the company, the trust, the empire. But it didn't come. Instead, Sanderson cleared his throat and continued. "To my former husband, Joseph Charles Whitaker, I leave the controlling interest in M.A. Whitaker Strategies, including all corporate assets, investment vehicles, and voting rights therein, as well as the residual trust holdings not otherwise allocated, totaling approximately," he paused, $31 million. The room froze. My breath caught. Ryan sat motionless, lips parted. Even the younger lawyer blinked twice, as if recalculating the air in the room. Sanderson turned the page. "In accordance with her wishes, I will now play the final statement. This message is dated June 3rd, the day following the document's execution." He pulled out a small black recording device and pressed play. Mary's voice filled the room, clear, strong, unshaken. Mary's voice filled the room like it had never left. Steady, cool, not cold, just exact. Like every word had been selected from a catalog of intention. "If you're hearing this, Joseph," she began, "then I'm no longer around to interrupt you. Which is probably for the best. I always did interrupt you when things got too serious." A pause. Soft laughter in her tone. "I didn't expect to be writing a will this soon. I thought I had more time. We all do. But when the doctors used words like aggressive and non-responsive to treatment, I realized I couldn't afford to leave things unsaid. Or undone." Ryan shifted in his seat, his eyes locked on the table in front of him. I've had years to be angry at you. Years to rewrite our history into something that made more sense for who I wanted to be. I told myself I had to leave you behind to grow, that staying with you would have meant settling for small things, for safe things. Another pause. But in the months before the diagnosis, I started thinking about what safe really means. I thought about the nights we stayed up retiling the bathroom. I thought about the peanut butter sandwiches you used to bring me at 2 a.m. when I was finishing grant proposals. I thought about the time you gave up your teaching position so I could take the job in D.C. I don't know why those memories came back so vividly. Maybe because the mind knows when it's running out of space. She exhaled in the recording. That exhale broke something in me. I gave you nothing in the divorce, Joe. Not because you didn't deserve anything, but because I thought I had to draw a line, to preserve the version of me I was building. And I see now that it was cowardice disguised as clarity. Ryan finally looked up. As for you, Ryan, my brilliant, driven son, I know what you expected. I know the plans you made, the assumptions. I also know that you've grown up believing that success is owed to those who demand it loudest. That legacy is a reward for ambition. There was a pause in the recording, a long one, the kind of silence that forces you to sit in it. But legacy isn't built on ambition. It's built on character, and I failed to teach you that. Ryan's mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. You wanted my empire. You thought it was yours. But the truth is, Ryan, you've spent your life managing expectations, not people. Assets, not relationships. I love you. I always have. But love isn't the same thing as endorsement. A click. The end of the message. The room remained completely still. I didn't move. I wasn't sure I could. My heart was pounding like I'd run miles, not sat still. I stared down at my hands in my lap, calloused, older than I remembered. Mary's voice still echoed in my ears. I wanted to go outside, breathe fresh air, lie down. But no one moved. Then Ryan did. He stood abruptly, his chair screeching back against the hardwood floor. "This is a stunt," he snapped. "It's emotional manipulation." She wasn't thinking clearly. Mrs. Whitaker underwent a full cognitive evaluation prior to finalizing this document, Sanderson said calmly. Her mental capacity was certified. The video and audio are legally valid. Ryan turned to me, his face twisted. "You really sat there and let her do this?" "I didn't even know she was sick," I replied quietly. "You're a retired teacher who barely knows how to work a smartphone, and she left you a corporation and $30 million. He let out a bitter laugh. "She didn't trust me to run it, but she trusted you." I didn't answer. There was nothing I could say that wouldn't sound like triumph. And I felt no triumph, only a strange, quiet ache. Not pride, not relief, just sadness. Because in a way he was right. I didn't want it. I hadn't asked for it. But now I had it, and it meant something, whether I liked it or not. I walked out of that office with a leather binder full of paperwork, a stack of trust documents, and a business card for the firm's wealth advisor. I didn't know what any of it really meant yet. I didn't care. What I did care about was that someone had finally said it, out loud, and with no room for argument. I wasn't the villain of that story. And maybe that was all I'd ever needed. 3 days later, I sat in the garden behind my apartment, watching the maple tree shed its leaves like tired hands letting go. Ryan hadn't called. I wasn't surprised. He'd always moved fast. Deals, decisions, relationships. I'd spent years trying to get him to slow down, to look people in the eye, to say thank you, to pause before reacting. He never listened. But that day, as I sat with Mary's letter in my lap, I wondered if maybe, just maybe, her words had reached something in him that mine never could. If you're still here listening, thank you. Some stories are quiet. Some people are too. But if this one meant something to you, subscribe. Not just for me, but for everyone who's ever been rewritten and finally found their place again. 3 days after the funeral, I walked into the office of M.A. Whitaker Strategies, like a man entering someone else's dream. The lobby was all glass and chrome, with a marble reception desk and a waterfall feature that gurgled quietly, like even the building refused to raise its voice. The woman at the desk looked up from her monitor. She couldn't have been older than 30. "Can I help you?" I almost turned around. I was wearing the same blazer I'd used for school board meetings a decade ago. Navy, frayed cuffs, elbow patches, and next to her sharp black suit, I felt like I'd shown up to a wedding in overalls. "My name is Joseph Whitaker," I said. "I have an appointment with the executive team." She blinked. Then her posture straightened like someone had just plugged her in. "Oh, yes, of course. Mr. Whitaker, I'll let them know you've arrived." She gestured toward a long bench of leather chairs. I sat. The waterfall trickled. The clock ticked. My knees bounced involuntarily, and I felt the weight of all the eyes that might be watching. The ones who knew who I was now, or thought they did. 10 minutes passed, then 15. Finally, the assistant returned. "Right this way, sir." The conference room overlooked the city skyline, floor-to-ceiling windows letting in a panorama of rooftops and construction cranes. Around the table sat 6 people, all of them younger than me, all of them holding tablets or sleek notebooks with magnetic closures. A woman stood to greet me. Late 40s, crisp navy dress, sharp jawline. "I'm Clarissa Hall, CFO. Welcome, Mr. Whitaker." "Joe," I said automatically. "Just Joe." They smiled politely. "We've all read the terms of the will," Clarissa said. "And while the transition is unconventional, we're committed to ensuring continuity and performance stability for our stakeholders." I nodded like I understood. A younger man, probably legal, cleared his throat. "Our main concern, of course, is whether you intend to retain your position as chairman or delegate to an interim board." I looked at him. He said chairman like it meant something, like it was a word that belonged to people who read Harvard Business Review for fun. I took a breath. "My wife, ex-wife, built this," I said. "I watched her pour herself into it, even when it was just folders on the dining room table and phone calls during dinner. I never wanted to compete with that. And I'm not here to start now." Clarissa raised an eyebrow. "So you intend to relinquish control?" "No," I said. "I intend to listen." A few murmurs around the table. "I won't pretend I'm qualified to run a firm like this. But I do think I understand something that maybe got lost along the way." I leaned forward slightly. "People?" Silence, but not hostile. One of the younger women, brunette, quiet eyes, nodded. "Actually," she said softly, "that might be exactly what we need." The meeting lasted 2 hours. I didn't say much. I asked questions. I listened. I watched. I saw the way people flinched when they talked about quarterly targets. I saw how every suggestion had to come with data, backup, bullet points. I saw fear, not panic, but the kind that calcifies into rigidity. The fear of being wrong. That was something Mary never had. But she had created it in others. And now, maybe, it was time to loosen that grip. Later that evening, back at home, I opened my email to find a message from Ryan. Just the subject line. You win. No greeting. No body. No sign-off. I stared at it for a long time. What does it mean to win when all you feel is tired? I replied with one sentence. This was never about winning. I didn't hear back. That Sunday, I went to the park across from my old high school, the same bench Mary and I used to sit on while waiting for Ryan's soccer practice to finish. The trees were bare now, their twisted limbs stretched toward a pale gray sky. A chill rolled through the wind. A little girl was feeding ducks by the pond, her father standing behind her, hands in his pockets, patient, silent. I wondered if he would one day be told he didn't matter, that his time didn't count, that all the quiet things he gave weren't enough. I hoped not, because I knew now they do matter. Every forgotten sacrifice, every silent compromise, every soft yes that makes space for someone else's dream, they matter more than the world likes to admit. If this story is still with you, if it stirred something quiet in your own memory, subscribe. We tell these stories so no one feels invisible. And maybe, just maybe, so someone like Ryan doesn't grow up thinking love needs proof. 3 weeks after the funeral, I opened the drawer in my nightstand that I hadn't touched in years. It was the drawer where I kept things I didn't want to remember, but couldn't bring myself to throw away. Old report cards, broken watch straps, the program from Mary's TEDx talk in 2014, where she spoke about leadership and the power of boundaries. I'd watched the video once. She hadn't mentioned me, not even a passing reference. But I didn't open the drawer for the talk. I opened it for the photo. It was the only one I had left of the three of us. Ryan must have been 6. He was missing one front tooth and beaming like he'd just saved the world. Mary had one hand on his shoulder, the other on my knee. We looked like a family trying to get it right. I stared at that photo for a long time. Not out of nostalgia. That's too easy a word. It was something more tangled, more honest, like grief and gratitude and guilt, all pulling in different directions. Because I hadn't always been a great husband. I'd been steady, yes. Supportive, yes. But I'd also been passive. I let things slide. I avoided conflict when I should have spoken. I thought love was maintenance, quiet, dependable, unshakable. Mary had wanted fire, and when she didn't find it in me, she built her own. That afternoon, I took the photo to be framed. The woman behind the counter didn't ask questions, just smiled and said, "Looks like a good memory." "It was," I replied, "and maybe still is." I picked out a simple walnut frame. No gold, no silver, just enough to say, this mattered. When I got home, I found a letter in my mailbox with no return address. Inside was a single folded sheet. "Dad, I've been thinking about that recording. I hated it. At first, it felt like she chose you and not me, like she forgot all the things I did for her in the last years. But the more I sit with it, I think she wasn't choosing between us. I think she was trying to say she failed both of us in different ways. I don't know how to process that. I'm not ready to talk, but I'm not ready to be done either. Ryan." I read the letter twice, then a third time, then folded it and placed it behind the newly framed photo. Not as forgiveness, but as a placeholder for something that might grow. Later that week, Clarissa from the firm asked if I'd be willing to record a short message for the annual shareholder meeting. Something about Mary, about the transition, about values. I said yes. They set up a camera in my living room, brought lights, microphones. The young technician looked nervous, like he expected me to fumble through it or wander off mid-sentence. But when the light went red, I spoke clearly. Not about numbers, not about strategy, about people, about the way Mary used to sit on the floor sorting color-coded folders while humming old Motown songs, about how ambition doesn't have to be sharp-edged, about how dignity, real dignity, is what you do when no one is looking. I ended with one sentence. If you want to build something that lasts, start by listening to the quietest person in the room. That clip got more feedback than any keynote they'd ever posted. They asked me to do more. I said I'd think about it. But first, I took a drive to the lake where Mary and I spent our 5th anniversary, where we'd eaten peanut butter sandwiches on a dock and argued about whether ducks could feel jealousy. She swore they could. I'd laughed, rolled my eyes, and kissed her mid-sentence. That memory hadn't visited me in years. But now, sitting on that same dock, alone, I could hear her voice as clearly as if she were behind me. And for the first time since the funeral, I let myself cry. Not out of loss, but out of love that still had shape. If you've ever sat with a memory you thought you lost, if you've ever loved someone imperfectly and still meant every word, subscribe. These stories are ours, and they deserve to be heard. 6 weeks after the funeral, I sat in a community center gymnasium beside a folding table with a name tag that read, Joseph Whitaker, Foundation Advisory Board. Across from me were 6 teenagers, slouched in plastic chairs, pretending not to care. A girl with streaks of purple in her braids, a boy who kept tapping his pencil like it owed him money, and a few others with guarded eyes that said, Don't expect too much from me. I didn't. That wasn't why I was here. The foundation had existed on paper for years, a tax structure Mary had created to move money efficiently. But now it was real. It had a name, a mission, a modest space in the back of the firm's offices, and its first project, scholarships for kids who'd aged out of the foster system but wanted to study architecture, design, or public planning. Mary would have rolled her eyes. She thought scholarships were Band-Aids. But I didn't care. I wasn't building a legacy. I was building something small and honest, something that looked like her and also like me. One of the girls raised her hand. Are you, rich now? I smiled. By some people's standards. Another hand shot up. Did you build anything famous? No, but I built things that didn't fall down. That's important too. Laughter. Not loud, but real. Then the boy with the pencil tapping said, My last foster dad said I'd never be more than a landscaper. I looked at him. Well, I said, you'll know how to shape the ground before you build on it. That's a head start. He didn't smile, but he stopped tapping the pencil. That night, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. When I answered, there was silence. Then, Hey, it's me, Ryan. I got your message, he said. I figured. I've been thinking about what she said, about legacy, character. I let the silence stretch. Not heavy, just enough space for him to fill if he wanted to. "I'm not ready to talk about the business," he said finally. "But I saw the shareholder video." "Oh? You didn't sound like a man who inherited something. You sounded like someone who earned it." I swallowed. That one landed harder than I expected. "Thanks," I said. More silence. Then, soft and unexpected, "Do you still make those burnt grilled cheese sandwiches?" I smiled. "I do." "Can I bring the wine?" "Yes," I said. "You can bring the wine." He came over the next night. We didn't talk about Mary. Not at first. We talked about his new running shoes, my neighbor's war with squirrels, the price of groceries. "The third sandwich in," he finally said. "She was scared. You know that, right?" "Of what?" "That people would forget what she built if she let anyone else take credit." I nodded. She didn't need to be scared. He looked down at his plate. "I was scared too," he said. "That if I didn't keep her empire intact, I'd lose the last part of her." "You didn't," I said. "You just lost the version of her you thought she needed to be." He nodded. Slowly. And for the first time in a long time, we sat without any walls between us. 3 months later, I stepped onto a small stage at a local college to speak at a memorial lecture series in Mary's name. The crowd was small, faculty, students, a few donors. Nothing grand. I spoke not about her resume, or her board seats, or her accolades. I spoke about the sound she made when she was lost in thought, about the way she wrote grocery lists in cursive, about how she once convinced an entire city council to redesign a park because the benches didn't encourage real conversation. I ended with this. The most important thing Mary ever built wasn't her company. It was the space she carved in the world for people to become more than what others expected. That includes me, and I hope someday it includes you. On my way home, I passed by the lake again. The dock was empty, just soft ripples on the water, catching the last of the light. I sat down on the edge, shoes off, feet in the cold water. I didn't say anything, didn't need to. Some stories don't end with thunder or applause. Some just settle in your chest like a stone that's finally found its place. If this story stayed with you, even after the screen fades, don't keep it to yourself. Subscribe, share, and remember, sometimes the quietest people have the most to say. To hear the next story, click the box on the left.